A toast to the hunters from your friends at Grainbelt. May the mornings be clear and the fresh air be crisp. May you find solace in the silence. May the stillness settle your soul. May your long shot stay true. May your heart roam free. May you find what you seek in the fields you stalk. May your call to the wild be answered, and at the end of the day, may you share in the thrill of the hunt with your friends. So here's to the 8-pointers and the 12-ouncers. Here's to you and to your thirst for adventure. Bring Grainbelt to the outdoors with our limited edition premium hunting season pack. This season, enter to win a hunting trip for 2 to Brown's Hunting Lodge, wherever you can find premium 12 and 24-pack cans. For more information, visit our website at grainbelt.com/hunting-trip.
Hi, everybody. Ron Schera here with another Minnesota Bound podcast. And we have another special guest, as they all are special. But we're going to talk to one of my favorite chefs and a wild game chef. In fact, that's our topic today. And he is none other. You've seen him on Minnesota Bound, daughter Laura, for years, fixing all kinds of wild things. Jim Kyndberg is with us. Jim, welcome to our Minnesota Bound podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ron.
Well, listen, my level of cooking is kind of over hard eggs. I mean, that's kind of where I'm at. I can do some deep fat fry walleyes, but a lot of people say, oh, that's awful. Well, I don't think so. But anyway, you're in a different league, which is why you're my special guest. At this time of year, Jim, as you well know, a lot of people are out hunting deer for venison, pheasants, ducks, rough grouse, you name it. As somebody like yourself who is also an outdoor dude and a chef, when it comes to wild game, what's your first thought as a chef about preparing it?
Oh, my first thought starts out in the field, honestly, when we're harvesting, putting the best shot you can, best ethical, get them down quickly and quietly. Hopefully you don't lock any of that adrenaline into that muscle. And then making sure you chill that meat down, clean them out and chill it down as quick as possible. That's a big part.
Well, I was going to ask you, you hear a lot about that. Oh, deer's been wounded, adrenaline gets in the meat. What is there truth to that, or what does the adrenaline do? Will you taste it?
It tightens up the muscle. It won't allow it to relax. And that's from my personal experience. I don't know the science behind it. I just know from deers that I've had to track, it was even the sausage I made out of some of these deer that I've tracked for extended periods of time. It created tough sausage, and that meat is going through an absolute grinder, literally. So I do believe there is some truth to that.
Does that carry over to pheasants, for example?
I've had it in a grouse. I've experienced the same thing in a grouse, where it was, hours before it had been harvested in the field, and maybe it still had a little rigor mortis in it. That could have been it too. But grouse should not be tough. And it was a tough grouse breast, which was really frustrating because those are such little treasures.
All right, Jim. Well, let's start with a big dish in Minnesota in November in the fall is venison. You mentioned, hopefully the animal has a quick, humane death, and you cool the meat quickly and get it, either cut it up yourself or take it to a butcher shop. What happens after that, as far as you're concerned as a chef?
Just understanding the different cuts and how they perform when being prepared. Backstrap versus, something off the leg or rump. They're going to cook a little bit differently, and especially with wild game, because you don't have that internal marbling of fat to kind of help forgive some sins of maybe overcooking. A lot of it translates into making sure you're seasoning it properly, searing it properly, roasting it properly, letting it rest, just because you don't, that wild game is so much leaner. Everybody loves the tenderloins, right? And those are pretty easy to prepare. You can season those with a little salt and pepper and sear those in your cast iron pan, cook them to a perfect medium rare, bring them out, let them rest for a minute, slice them, and they're delicious.
Yeah.
But that's the rump is not going to, anything off the hind is not going to cook the same way that is. Those are what you want to reserve for those roasts, more of that slow and low cooking in a very moist environment versus that, very intense dry heat that you seared the tenderloins in. So just knowing those different cuts and how they perform and the way they taste the best, that comes with time. That also comes with good recipes.
Well, I've always been one. I like you. I like the tenderloins, some of the steaks on a venison. I've had bad luck with the roast. I think because I didn't do what you just were talking about. So I take the easy way. I have the butcher grind up the meat in the roast into burger, and I have him add some pork, and I
Sure.
find that makes a great meat for chili or hamburgers, cheeseburgers, you name it.
It does. You're not lying. That pork fat goes a long, long way with the ground venison. If you don't add that, it tends to, it's tough to make it really tasty, juicy burger without that pork fat in there.
Mm-hmm. And you kind of leave it up to your butcher to know how much pork to put in there?
Yeah, usually it's up to 30% is the maximum. Some will go down to, 10, 12%, but a 30%, pork venison grind is about as much as I would ever want to go.
All right, so you bring the venison home. It's all packaged. It's labeled. Well, your wife is lukewarm about having venison to begin with, so you put it in the freezer, and she's hesitant to get it out unless you do, and so there it sits. So my question is, what? How long can you keep venison in a freezer before you ought to feed it to the coyotes?
Well, that's a great question. And it's a question I've been asked many times, and I always answer with a 1 year mark. So if you have not, consumed that meat within a year, that doesn't mean it's bad. It's still edible for human consumption. It's just going to start losing quality.
Hmm.
And the other reason I like to give that 1 year mark too is it gets you motivated to clean out some room in the freezer because hopefully you're going back out into the woods and replenishing that supply, right?
There you go. Yeah. Before we leave the topic of venison, Jim, do you have a real quick a venison dish that you like?
One of my favorites, this is funny because we just prepared it. I mean, we're close to Halloween, right? And every year I do a chili. We live in a small town that gets a lot of traffic for trick or treaters. So we always have a party on Halloween. I always make a big batch of chili, and it's always got some wild game in it. So I use some venison and I save a lot of the trim and scraps that goes into it. But one of my favorite parts is the heart. And people get a little squeamish sometimes, like, ooh, I don't know if I'd like heart. But heart is absolutely delicious. But it also is one of those meats I kind of touched on before. You got to know what you're cooking. So I always, use the reference, cook it 2 minutes or 2 hours. There's no in between because it is a muscle that gets a lot of work and it can be very tough, but it can also be tender and it's also very delicious. Um, so, you got to kind of know what you're doing, but um, that's one I just, if you know how to clean it, you kind of butterfly it and there's a little silver skin. It's got the two chambers. So you take the little silver skin out as best as possible. And then,
So, Jim, I gotta say, talking about the heart, I've had a lot of people tell me that's good. I guess I didn't think I'd be squeamish, but I get a little squeamish there. But I'll take your word for it, okay?
if I ever get a chance, I would love to show you what I'm talking about.
Venison heart chili. I can't wait.
There you go.
If you are hungry, you've tuned into the right place because we're talking to my favorite wild game chef, Jim Kyndberg, who is also an avid outdoor guy himself, and talking about some of the secrets or tips for cooking wild game. Just quit talking about venison, although venison could be a topic for the whole show, I'm sure. But Jim, you mentioned let's talk about say pheasants. I mean, again, pheasant breast is doesn't have a lot of fat in it, and so you got to do some special things. But overall, it's pretty good, pretty good flavored meat, right?
It's a delicious protein. If you don't overcook it, it's really good.
Is that the usual problem? Is oh my gosh, it's wild! I got to cook the hell out of it.
Exactly. That's the most common mistake that I've come across, and talking with other people too. They would have to agree with, yeah, don't overcook it. That's where you get the bad textures. You cook the flavor right out of it. It's not an enjoyable experience. Sometimes even, like the classic, what is it, the cream of wild mushroom soup and pheasant breast, you can still overcook it in that, and it can be dry and stringy. But that's why it's so popular, is because you're putting it in a cream-based sauce that's going to retain some moisture and, help it taste better, help the texture, etc.
I would say that pheasant breast without a cream sauce is probably not a good idea. That would be me, a non-chef, talking. Of course, you might have some other thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing pheasant and cream sauce. That can be a very delicious recipe as well. But it's, 100% not necessary if you have confidence in the technique, from the seasoning to the searing, to the internal temperature that you're cooking it to, then letting it rest a little bit so it can reabsorb those juices before you cut into it and eat it.
Mm-hmm. I think one common mistake, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but is that, oh my gosh, if it's wild, a lot of people tend to overcook, right?
They do 100%. That's I hear that quite a bit. So they think, it's a lot safer to cook it if it's been through a federally inspected plant and versus, harvesting it out in the woods. So there's that mental perception, but it's not true. I mean, it's in one of my experiences, that wild game is, I live for eating that stuff. It's delicious.
Hey, we'll be back with Jim Kyndberg to talk more about wild game cooking right after these important messages.
Our good friends at Connecticut. You already know how much my family loves Connecticut water. We have it in our home, and just this summer added Connecticut water at the cabin. What a difference. For as long as I can remember, we've dealt with that darn sour cabin water. That stinky, foul well water. After a really painless 4-hour installation, we now have Connecticut soft water and also Connecticut's K5 drinking system. No more bottled water to try and make coffee in the morning. It's great drinking water right out of the K5 tap. Our laundry no longer smells funny, and Connecticut water cleaned up our showers and dishes. The world's most efficient, worry-free water system. Visit Connecticut.com to find a dealer near you and join the Connecticut family. Also, a big shout out to the Minnesota Propane Association.
Did you know that a propane gas furnace lifespan averages 20 years while electric heat pumps only last about 14 years? And propane furnaces work in all temperatures while delivering warm and consistent heat in your home. Why buy 2 heating systems when propane furnace can do it all? Lasts longer, works better, and costs less. These things and more are being done today with propane, the right energy right now.
Hewitt Docks, Lifts, and Pontoon Legs began in a small south-central Minnesota town with a mission to make dock install and removal easier by inventing the Roll-A-Dock. Well, now the company has evolved to provide everything you might need to improve your lake time. In addition to the classic Roll-A-Dock or the new Ultra Dock system, Hewitt offers all-terrain staircases, gangways, canopies, and lifts, along with any accessory you might need. Celebrate 50 years of business with us. Go to HewittRad.com to enter for a chance to win a free dock and monthly prizes. Hewitt Docks, Lifts, and Pontoon Legs. Work hard, play harder. You deserve a Hewitt.
Welcome back to the final segment here. We're talking, I'm getting hungry. We're talking wild game cooking with one of the top experts that I know, Jim Kyndberg, a top chef in the Twin Cities area and also an active outdoorsman. Jim, all right, we talked about don't overcook your wild game, etc. Now we got to get the ducks. I've never found a good way to cook ducks in my own kitchen, or my wife, bless her heart, and she's a great cook in her own right. But boy, I go to Canada and there's a little Chinese restaurant up there. We give them some ducks, they cook them, and they're to die for. So I bring some home. I can never duplicate what they do, and something's wrong. Are ducks that difficult to cook?
Ducks, yeah, kind of like salmon is to the family of fish. Ducks are to the family of fowl birds. They do have a little stronger flavor. They're a little trickier to cook sometimes, retain that natural moisture. But the reason we probably like them so much when they're coming out of that Asian restaurant that you referenced is because of the heavy marinades and sauces. The big flavors coming from that kind of balance out those flavors of the duck. And I'm guessing they're not overcooking those ducks either. So that's some of my favorite recipes when preparing duck, when they're marinated in soy sauce. And I like to sneak a little maple syrup in there for the sweetness too, to kind of balance off the saltiness. If you like it spicy, put some chili flakes in there. And ginger can go a long way too in those marinades. It's really delicious.
So your suggestion here is to get a good recipe for duck. If you're like me, you look like shoe leather when it came out.
Right. Yeah, duck can definitely do that. Shoe leather is a good example, good comparison.
Yeah. Now, wild goose, the breasts, I cut those into what I would call fingers, and roll them in salt and pepper, or roll them in flour, a little salt and pepper, and put them in a hot frying pan, flip them a little bit once or twice, and eat. That's about the only way I've found to do Canada goose, for example.
That's a great way to do it. And so much wild game you can do with that same exact principle that you just explained. Just season it with salt and pepper. If you want to roll it in a little flour, sear it in oil in a cast iron pan. It's delicious. I don't care if it's venison, if it's pheasant, if it's goose. Once again, being sure not to overcook it. And you get that true flavor of what that critter tastes like too. I mean, it's really delicious meat.
Yeah, it is healthy meat too. It hasn't been fed a bunch of chemicals, I guess.
Exactly. It's doing what God intended. It's running around the woods and foraging and living its life. And then it gets to sustain our life if we are lucky enough to consume it.
Well, Jim, we're just about out of time here. One last question. Of all the wild game, we haven't even talked about ruffed grouse. I don't know if you could ruin ruffed grouse. What's your favorite of all?
Well, if we're not talking about ruffed grouse, I got to throw that out because that is my favorite of all.
Mine
just
too.
Because it's such a challenging hunt too, and that meat is so delicious. It's so clean. But honest to God, it's a toss-up between. I've had some delicious rabbit. I really do like rabbit, and pheasant is hard to beat too when it's done right. That's a really tough question.
I was raised on squirrels, and a lot of people look squirrels, those river tree rats. People don't know what they're talking about. I think one of my favorites is two, elk and caribou. Both of them are at the top of the list for me, above venison, way above venison. I don't think you can ruin elk. I've had moose. Moose is good. It's just kind of a little tougher meat. But I guess, to your credit, Jim, any of it is good if it's prepared in the right way.
That's a big part of it. I 100% agree.
Well, listen, we talked about venison. You gave some great tips. We talked about pheasants. Pretty hard to ruin pheasants. But as we mentioned, overcooking is the big hazard there. I tell you, I have to admit, there's one wild game or one wild bird that I can't seem to, neither can my wife. We can't cook it, so we like it. And that's the, that is a wild duck. So I don't know what's going on there.
Wild duck, that is a tricky one. I'll agree with you on that one. And, from species to species, they all have their own little unique characteristics. If possible, I always like to reserve the the skin on the breast. If you can pluck those birds, get the feathers off of them.
What does that do? What does that do?
It helps keep some moisture, and that's pretty much all fat on there. It renders really crispy, so you get your saute pan, cast iron pan, kind of medium-high heat, and you want to place that skin side down in the pan with just a little bit of oil, and let that skin crisp up. And that really does help the overall taste and texture of the duck. The other thing you can do really is marinate it. You go a little heavier on the seasonings. If you're a little adverse to some of the stronger flavors, you want to match that kind of power to power with your seasoning profile. So whether that's a marinade, whether that's a dry rub, those can also help really make it a more pleasant experience.
Well, for a chef like you, talking about dry rubs, marinating, all that stuff, that's easy to say because you have all this experience. If any listeners are saying, oh, yeah, hey, how do you do that, blah, blah, blah. Do you have some favorite resources that you would suggest they use or read besides watching Minnesota Bound, you and Laura doing all this fancy cooking?
Sure. Yeah, no, we've got plenty of recipes online, and it's easy enough to, Google any recipe these days. And also in the grocery store, have some fun, experiment with, what looks good to you on the grocery store shelves. But one of my favorite go-tos, especially for duck, is a soy-based marinade. And it's very simply just, I like to use a low-sodium soy sauce. There's a product that you'll see in the health food aisles called Bragg. It's a liquid aminos. It is, very similar to soy sauce in flavor, but I use that a lot in my marinades. So that, if I was going in the Asian direction, maybe a little toasted sesame oil, some fresh ginger, garlic, some chili paste or chili flake. Let that sit in a Ziploc bag in the fridge overnight. And then when you take it off, just kind of pat it dry before you sear it. Otherwise, those, seasonings tend to, kind of burn or over caramelize in the cooking process.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good. I think we mentioned earlier, when it comes to Canada geese, now a lot of people don't like Canada geese. I kind of do, but I have always just taken the breasts out and cut them into fingers, rolled them in seasoned flour, put them in a frying pan with a little oil or butter and oil and hot, and flipped them a couple times and put them on the plate. To me, that serves a couple purposes. One, it's easy, and two, like you always say, don't overcook. And so you don't tend to overcook when you do it that way. Do you have any comments about that?
Right. No, that's spot on. And some of the simplest recipes are some of the best recipes too. And I love that technique because it gives you the true flavor of the game. What the meat tastes like when you don't over season it or have to over marinate it. You really get that true flavor. So that's great. One of my favorite recipes for Canadian goose. It's kind of a camp classic, but we cut them into smaller pieces like that. And we may marinate them in beer and barbecue sauce overnight. Then we'll wrap them in bacon. If we're getting fancy, we'll put a little slice of apple or maybe some cheese in there. And then just slow cook them on a charcoal grill. And they are delicious.
That's a pretty fancy recipe, which reminds me about mourning doves. Minnesota has a mourning dove season.
Yes.
It's tough because our mourning doves, we raise quite a few of them, but they tend to migrate out of the state almost about the time the season opens. But it reminded me, we would take the mourning dove breasts and wrap them in bacon, maybe a pepper or something, I can't remember, put them on the grill, and they're delicious.
Yeah. It's, there's not much meat to those little doves, but that meat is delicious. It's even less than a grouse, right?
Yeah, it's dark meat, where grouse is a lighter meat. Speaking of rough grouse, I don't know if there's any way they need any help. I mean, they're my favorite wild game bird.
Mine as well. I absolutely love grouse. I mean, you have to work hard for them typically. Every once in a while you get an easy one, but that's usually not the case. It's usually a long day in the woods, a lot of walking through thick brush. And when you do get those birds, they truly are treasures.
The Minnesota History Center presents Sherlock Holmes, the exhibition. Learn about the powers of observation and solve an interactive mystery while following the footsteps of the world's most famous detective. Learn more at mnhs.org/SherlockMN.
Hi there, Ron Shera here for Star Bank. If you're putting your money into mega banks down the street, who knows where that money's being used? Bank locally. Keep your money local with a community bank that actually cares about you, your family, your business, and your goals. Check out the bank we use at Minnesota Bound. Try Minnesota's own Star Bank. You can find them online at starbank.net. When you call Star Bank, you actually hear a real living person answering the phone. Star Bank has 10 convenient locations around Minnesota to serve you and all the mobile banking products that you need to manage your money. Check out all that Star Bank has to offer at starbank.net.
Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
It's time to plan your fall hunt in North Dakota. Get this, with an estimated 3.4 million breeding ducks, North Dakota's central region is prime habitat for hunting waterfowl. In fact, right now, the state's breeding duck index sits 38% above the long-term average, and the water's up too. The spring water index is up 616% over 2021. That's a good thing. Now, when you consider that North Dakota has approximately 700,000 acres of private land open to public walk-in hunting, guess what? You've got an outdoor oasis. For the latest information about public hunting lands and private land open to sportsmen and women, visit North Dakota Game and Fish Department. Bag your limit this fall in North Dakota. Visit legendarynd.com.
Jim, we're almost out of time here, but we haven't talked about fish. Now, when it comes to walleye, I do all the fish cooking in my family, but it's pretty much deep fat fried. I put them in. I don't do a beer batter. I don't like that because there's too much batter. I use a dry powder. My friend Gary Roach has a fish batter that's just dry. I soak the fillets in beer and make sure all the bones are out, and then soak them in beer, and then I put the dry coating on, and 350 degrees oil. That's the key, and bingo. But a lot of people say, that's all you do is deep fat fry walleye. I go, well, I don't know. That's my skill level. What do you say to that?
There's plenty of options out there, and there's nothing wrong with deep fat frying. I'm a big fan of it on occasion. But I do like the alternative too. Some of the fun things we've done with fish in the past is, like if you dredge it in your dry flour mixture, whatever you're using, you can also use nuts and stuff like that. If a lot of people are gluten-free these days too, it's a nice alternative. So finely ground almonds or finely ground pecans, and just use that like a flour where you dredge them with that. I like to soak them or mix up some egg wash, which is basically just one egg with just a touch of milk. Whisk that up really good. You can use a fork in a bowl. But season your fish first, run it through that egg wash, and then just have your mixed, finely ground nuts and just kind of pat it into the fish fillet as well. And then you take your frying pan. You can melt a little butter. You can use oil. And I like to use a little lower heat when I'm working with nuts because they tend to burn. They don't have such a high resistance to heat. So over medium heat until they get golden brown, flip them once, let them cook through, and they're really delicious. A little bit of lemon juice over the top. It's a really nice alternative.
That sounds very, very good. What about northern pike? They're very popular. Of course, a lot of people, there's the issue with the bones that are tough to get out unless you know what you're doing. We won't get into that, but northern pike has more of some people would say, a fishy flavor. So some people like the fishy flavor. Others say, no, give me the bland walleye. What's your take on northern pike?
I don't find pike to be fishy. I mean, I agree with everyone else. The comments I hear basically are they're a pain in the butt to clean. They're slimy. There's a lot of bones to them, but if you're willing to take the effort and deal with those factors, and you can render a fillet of pike that is boneless, I don't find them that fishy if they're fresh and stored well. And I think it's a delicious alternative. I love walleye too, but walleye does not have a lot of flavor. Pike has a little bit more flavor than walleye, but I really don't find it fishy.
Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of people say I'd rather have northern pike because I like that flavor, where the walleye is kind of bland. I guess I like them both.
Agreed.
I've got here's an issue that I can't seem to solve: bluegills and crappies. Now, when I was a kid, we'd catch bluegills. We would gut them, scale them, and then my mother would fry them in an iron frying pan with, I think, lard.
Okay.
And I remember them as just being crispy and delicious. And subsequently, now in my adult life, I try to do bluegills that way, or I fillet them out, or I take the skin off, or whatever. I can't seem to duplicate the great taste of bluegills like I did remember as a boy. Would that be the oil?
It could be the oil. I mean, that lard does have flavor in it. I mean, in years past, you heard all the horror stories about cooking with lard. I'm actually reading things about benefits of cooking with lard today. So
right.
You be the judge. I'm not being the expert here by any means, but
right.
I do prefer the flavor of lard when frying. It's a old technique, but a good technique for sure.
Well, I think I'm going to try lard next time I do bluegills and or crappies. Salmon, we don't, have a lot of salmon naturally in Minnesota. We have some steelhead, but that's not salmon. It's a rainbow trout out of the Lake Superior. There are some salmon in Lake Superior. A lot of people go over to Lake Michigan and catch salmon. My friend Burger Brothers, they get a bunch of salmon. They actually, I think, buy it at a store, but they smoke theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts about salmon?
I love salmon. The wild species, I agree in Minnesota, it's not the same product as if you're paying the big dollars for the Alaskan harvested stuff. But it is a good product. And I prefer, if it is local salmon coming off the Great Lakes, to smoke them. I think that's a great way to do it. And I typically will do a wet brine with some brown sugar and some salt. Let that soak in there for 3 to 4 hours. And then I air dry it. So I rinse it off under cold water after it's been brined. And I just let it be exposed to air in the fridge or outside if you have the right temperature. And so it gets that little bit of skin, that tackiness. And that really grabs the smoke and adds a lot of flavor. And it also seals in a lot of the moisture too. So you get that really moist, smoky, delicious meat.
Interesting. My friend, the Burger Brothers, they cold smoke there. They built a cold smoking device. It looks like a chimney, but anyway, that's more way over my pay grade. I'll just tell you that. I don't remember if I asked you this or not, Jim. Of all the wild game, well, we haven't even talked elk or caribou, which are two of my favorites. I would put elk above venison, way above venison in my book. Moose is pretty good. I've had that too. It's a little tougher, stringier meat, but it's good flavor. How about you? Do you have an all-time favorite wild game of whether you've shot it or yourself or tasted it from somebody else's freezer?
Well, my easy answer is grouse. I've got a long history. That was the first bird I hunted. It was my first experience out in the woods with a shotgun. It's always been a special treat for me. But one of my not so common, most favorite items to cook is the venison heart. And people get a little squeamish on that. But the process that I've come up with really renders a delicious product. And I love just the surprise element when I expose it to my friends or family and get them to try it. And they're always very apprehensive. And then they taste it and you see it in their eyes that, yeah, it's pretty darn delicious.
Yeah, you can't be thinking about it too much.
No, and it's one of those. It's a little tricky to cook. I mean, it's my rule of thumb is cook it 2 minutes or 2 hours. Anything in between, it's really rough. It's tough. It's not a pleasant experience. But when you get it right, when it's seasoned properly, cooked properly, slice it thin. It's a texture, it's a flavor that's very, very appealing.
Well, it's a very fine muscle, actually.
Yeah, it gets a lot of work.
I'm laughing here because my daughter Simone just shot her first buck in the Minnesota deer season, and somebody asked her, "Are you going to save the heart?" And she rolled up her nose and said, "No way."
I've heard that many, many times, and then I get those people just to try one piece, and then you see it. It's a game changer.
Well, Jim, I wished I had your cooking skills. As you probably wish you had my hunting and fishing skills. We'll just leave it like that. But well, Jim, thank you for taking your time. I'm sure your pot is boiling over at the moment. So thank you again for joining us. That was Jim Kyndberg, and we're going to say goodbye here. That does it for the Minnesota Bound podcast. The stories behind the stories. Brought to you by Connecticut Water Treatment Systems. We'd also like to thank the Minnesota Historical Society, Minnesota Propane Association, Star Bank, my favorite bank, Hewitt Docks, North Dakota Tourism, and Grain Belt Camo Pack. Until next time, don't forget to introduce a kid to the great outdoors. Show them a little wild game cooking.